Okay, hello. This is a video about setting Windows 98 up in what is now Oracle Virtualbox and getting it with good graphics drivers and sound drivers and actually useful for playing old games in. I'm going to install and play an old game when it's all set up. The game I'm going to install and play is called Star Trek Generations. It's a game which does not work at all in Windows 7 or Windows XP. I think I've had problems with it in there as well. I'm actually using Windows 7 at the moment to do this. There are a few things you're going to need to do this before we start. First and foremost, you're obviously going to need Windows 98 disk to install Windows 98 from, and the serial code for Windows 98. And you will need probably this, which are the VirtualBox Visa drivers, Rain 2.0, which prevents Windows 98 from eating all of your CPU, 7-zip, which will allow me to get into that zip archive, and Cytec Display Doctor 7, optionally a serial code for that, which will stop it from deactivating itself after 21 days. Now these VirtualBox drivers, you can see there's a VirtualBox folder here, which you would automatically think, since we're using VirtualBox for the purpose of emulating Windows, that those would be the drivers you'd use. I actually recommend using the ones in the Uni folder for Universal instead. The rest are unimportant. It doesn't matter whether you have an ATI card, an Intel chipset, an Nvidia card. You must use either the VirtualBox or, as I would recommend, the Universal drivers. The reason for this is that VirtualBox does not present your actual graphics hardware to the operating system. It presents its own variant, which is actually a standard Visa device. If you don't know what that is, don't worry, you don't need to. To get these files into Windows 98, I used Magic ISO to create this Windows 98 Tools ISO. The process is pretty simple, and you can use the free version of Magic ISO to do that. So I need that, I need that, I need that, and I need that. We drop them into here, we go for File, Save, and we'll save it as that, and it'll overwrite the one I made earlier, which is all fine and dandy. And then you can mount that from within inside VirtualBox and you'll get your files through. The reason we have to work around like this is because Sun don't provide, Oracle now, don't provide the guest edition support for Windows 98 like they do for later operating systems. So, we've got everything we need, we've covered those. I'm going to fire up VirtualBox now, and you'll see I already have two Windows 98 virtual machines. These are two that I've set up earlier. I can delete this one actually. And we'll create a new one. We're going to call it Windows 98 2. It's going to have Windows 98 in it. And I'll give it 128 megs of RAM. We'll create a new hard disk for it. It's important to go for dynamically expanding at this point. I've tried using fixed size, but it seems to have some problems when the setup wants to format the disk. And to be honest, I can't really see a good use for fixed size storage anyway, so we'll keep it as dynamic. I'm going to go for 4 GB because I want to actually use it for more than one game, and it doesn't really take much, to be honest. Now, because I've already obviously got the Windows 98 2 VDI file, which was attached to the virtual machine I just deleted, I'm going to call it Windows 98 3. You can call it Windows 98, you can call it whatever you like, provided you know what it is when you come back to it later. So here we'll just check what's going on here. That's where it puts its hard disk, so this will be variable depending on what your Windows user actually is, and there's the size. So we press finish and it creates that. We'll press finish again and it will create the virtual machine there. Now this is the virtual machine I actually use for my retro game, and you can see here some of the settings are different. We're going to settings to reconfigure the machine after VirtualBox has populated it with some default settings. The main things we need to make sure are the video memory which I'm going to set initially to 24 megabytes, and we need to enable both of these boxes. Also for sound, choosing Sound Blaster 16 is a better plan than choosing the AC97 driver, because Windows 98 already has a Sound Blaster 16 driver in there, so you don't have to mess about with AC97 drivers. Now this is optional, but you can choose your installation medium here already. This is my Windows 98 disk, so we'll select that. If you don't select it at that point, then VirtualBox will ask you to select it when you start the machine. So we'll boot it up now with those settings in. The rest of this bit is actually pretty mundane. You want to start from CD-ROM. You want to start Windows 98 setup from the CD-ROM. If you've ever installed Windows before, then this won't be new to you. I will fast forward automatically through the tedious bits. It'll reboot at this point. You want to boot from CD-ROM again and go back through. It feels like restarting, but Windows 98 will immediately begin formatting what it calls the C drive. Do bear in mind, this is not actually the C drive on your machine. This is of course the Windows 98 2 or 3.vdi file that I created a moment ago. If you went for fixed size storage here, then it just kind of stops at 0% when it's doing this and doesn't want to work. So this is why we go for dynamic size. It'll sit and wait for a second, make sure what it's doing is correct. And you can see down here, this represents your hard drive access, this is the CD drive access, this is access to USB drives, network. This icon shows that I have nested paging and AMDV/VTX, which are the hardware emulation software. These icons indicate whether your pointer's captured or not, which it currently isn't. And this is the keyboard thing, so if I click here, you can see the mouse cursor thing lights up. I'll let it run through ScanDisk, and then we can go for Windows Setup. Now, things with Windows Setup, if you're in America, then you can probably select the defaults for this, but because I'm not, as you can perhaps tell by the sound of my voice, I'm going to have to choose some custom options which may or may not be relevant to you if you're somewhere else. And again, you can select whatever you want for these options. If you just want the defaults, then you might as well just go for typical installation. These are fairly irrelevant. This is the thing I'm going to have to change because I have a different key map to the rest of the world, it seems. Go for British there. Change my regional settings to English British. Again, this is only relevant if you're in England. If you're somewhere else, then choose your own regional settings. And if you're in America, you can probably skip that step entirely because the defaults will work for you. Now, file copy progress is not exactly interesting, so I'm going to skip this part and come back when it's finished copying files. Okay, so Windows Setup is now finished copying files, and this is what you immediately get afterwards. I'm going to put some details in, it doesn't really matter. If you don't accept the agreement, then you don't get to use Windows, so it's good to accept it. I'm going to pause again here and insert my serial code, which I have obtained. It doesn't really matter, as long as it's a legitimate serial code, then I don't really care where you got it from. I just can't show you mine because I don't think YouTube would appreciate it. Okay, so this is immediately after putting in the serial code. Windows 98 saved all information, and we will finish off. Now, this is another slightly tedious part, setting up any plug-and-play devices, and then it starts detecting non-plug-and-play hardware, which again takes a moment, and I'm going to pause while it does this. Okay, so that's just finished, and now it wants me to restart so we can reboot it. This will happen a lot. Now we want to reboot from the hard disk this time. again, because otherwise you'll have to start the setup all over again, and there wouldn't be much point in that now. So again, just keep your wits about you. It's not a complex procedure installing Windows. It never has been. It'll do this setting up stuff. The next thing I'm going to pause on in a minute is setting the system settings thing. This again, just set your time zone to whatever time zone you're actually in. That should match, the time here should also match the time in your host install. If it doesn't, then set it so it does. Again, this part isn't really complex, and then it'll sit and do this for a couple of minutes. I'm going to pause again while it does this. Okay, that's now finished. Immediately next is restart again. We'll do another reboot. Again, we want to boot from the hard disk because we're booting into Windows. Ooh, background change. Around half hour. One of those features of Windows 7 I particularly enjoy. I've got a good 30 or 40 different images in that folder. I don't want to